This location is the very Haroun National Park of Israel, where there is a spring of water. In Arabic, this spring is called Ain Jolet, meaning the spring of Goliath. This place was part of the Levant 700 years ago. In 1260, a decisive battle took place near this spring, a turning point in human history. On one side was Hulagu Khan, who had ravaged Baghdad, and on the other side was a Muslim ruler from the Mamluk Sultanate. How did this battle alter the course of human history? And which Mongol leader was the nemesis that Muslims had to confront against Hulagu Khan? The story of who was Hulagu Khan will be explored in today's second and final part. After the fall of Baghdad, from Iraq to Turkey, both Muslims and non-Muslims began presenting themselves in submission to the rule of Hulagu Khan. However, a Seljuk ruler from Turkey, Khusraw, played a strategic move. First, he presented Hulagu Khan with a pair of shoes on which his own image was crafted. Then, he bowed his head before Hulagu Khan and said, "Your Excellency, place your foot on the head of this servant." Whether Hulagu Khan actually placed his foot on Khusraw's head or not is unclear, but it is recorded in the annals of Mongol lords that the Mongol court was astonished and perplexed by this unprecedented submission. Those who accepted the allegiance to Hulagu Khan witnessed another Muslim ruler, Badr al-Din Lulu, the governor of Egypt, who was over 90 years old. When he was about to present himself at Hulagu Khan's court, the attendant stopped him, warning of the danger. In response, Badr al-Din happily replied, "If Hulagu Khan does anything, I will grab him by the ears." Badr al-Din came to Hulagu Khan's court with numerous gifts, including 2 golden earrings. Mongols had a tradition of wearing earrings, so Hulagu Khan accepted these gifts as well. Here, Badr al-Din made a request. He will personally put these earrings on Hulagu Khan. Hulagu Khan agreed to this request. The elderly Badr al-Din, with trembling hands, put these earrings on Hulagu Khan. Thus, he fulfilled his promise to apprehend Hulagu Khan by the ears. Many such gestures and gifts continued, and people kept accepting the allegiance of Hulagu Khan, but the rulers of Ayyubid in Syria and Mamluks in Egypt were not among those who came or offered tributes. At that time, different regions of Syria were under different rulers. Nasr al-Din Yusuf, the grandson of Salah al-Din Ayyubi, ruled over Damascus and Aleppo, while in Egypt, the Mamluk dynasty held power under their ruler Saif al-Din Qutuz. In the previous video, we showed that Hulagu Khan's elder brother, Mongol Khan, had decreed the establishment of Genghis Khan's system from the Amudarya to Egypt. Following this decree, Hulagu Khan aimed to conquer Syria and Egypt at any cost after the fall of Baghdad. After the capture of Baghdad, Hulagu Khan moved towards Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, which includes the cities of Tabriz and Mariga, became Hulagu Khan's headquarters. The elevated mountainous region you see is the famous Lake Oromaya, the largest island in Iran. It was once called the Shahi Island and is now referred to as the Islamic Island. On this island, Hulagu Khan built a fortress where a significant portion of the looted wealth from Baghdad was secured. With Azerbaijan secured, Hulagu Khan began preparations for war against Syria and Egypt. For this campaign, he assembled an army of 130,000 soldiers, including Armenians and Georgians besides the Turks. In late 1259, Hulagu Khan left Azerbaijan and proceeded towards Syria through Turkey. During this period, the present-day Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine were all part of Syria. Hulagu Khan wanted his presence in Syria to evoke fear before his entry, and indeed it did. Near the beautiful Lake Van in Turkey, there was a small fortress near the city of Ligwan, managed by an individual from the Ayyubid dynasty. When Hulagu Khan's army advanced towards this fortress, a confrontation occurred, and evidently, the defender was defeated. He was captured alive by the Mongols, and then he was compelled to cut and consume parts of his own body. In this inhumane act, the governor lost his life. Mongols proceeded to slaughter all Muslims in that region. Subsequently, Hulagu Khan swiftly moved towards the Syrian city of Aleppo. This city was also the capital of Nasr al-Din Yusuf. In January 1260, Hulagu Khan, along with his army, reached Aleppo. Before the arrival of Nasr al-Din, the city had been abandoned. In his absence, the defenders of the city had taken a position in a fortress-like structure. However, it is apparent that they were defeated. Mongols captured him alive, and then he was forced to cut and consume parts of his own body. In this inhumane act, the governor lost his life. The Mongol army proceeded to slaughter all Muslims in the region. After Aleppo, Hulagu Khan's next target was Damascus. Nasr al-Din had already left the city before the arrival of Hulagu Khan. His absence meant that the defenders of the city had tried to block Hulagu Khan from entering for a week but failed. When the Mongol forces entered the city, the defenders took positions in a fortress-like building and continued fighting against the Mongols. However, by February 25, 1260, this structure also fell into Mongol hands. Following this, the victorious Mongol army indulged in a massacre of Muslims in Aleppo with utmost brutality. The Mongol forces, including the banditry troops, destroyed the Jamia Mosque of Aleppo without Hulagu Khan's orders. They killed the majority of Muslims in the city. After Aleppo, Hulagu Khan's next target was Damascus. Nasr al-Din had already left the city before the arrival of Hulagu Khan. His absence meant that the defenders of the city had tried to block Hulagu Khan from entering for a week but failed. When the Mongol forces entered the city, the defenders took positions in a fortress-like building and continued fighting against the Mongols. However, by February 25, 1260, this structure also fell into Mongol hands. Following this, the victorious Mongol army indulged in a massacre of Muslims in Aleppo with utmost brutality. The Mongol forces, including the banditry troops, destroyed the Jamia Mosque of Aleppo without Hulagu Khan's orders. They killed the majority of Muslims in the city. In the previous video, we showed that Hulagu Khan's elder brother, Mongol Khan, had decreed the establishment of Genghis Khan's system from the Amu to Egypt. Following this decree, Hulagu Khan aimed to conquer Syria and Egypt at any cost after the fall of Baghdad. After the capture of Baghdad, Hulagu Khan moved towards Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, which includes the cities of Tabriz and Mariga, became Hulagu Khan's headquarters. The elevated mountainous region you see is the famous Lake Oromaya, the largest island in Iran. It was once called the Shahi Island and is now referred to as the Islamic Island. On this island, Hulagu Khan built a fortress where a significant portion of the looted wealth from Baghdad was secured. With Azerbaijan secured, Hulagu Khan began preparations for war against Syria and Egypt. For this campaign, he assembled an army of 130,000 soldiers, including Armenians and Georgians besides the Turks. In late 1259, Hulagu Khan left Azerbaijan and proceeded towards Syria through Turkey. During this period, the present-day Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine were all part of Syria. Hulagu Khan wanted his presence in Syria to evoke fear before his entry, and indeed it did. Near the beautiful Lake Van in Turkey, there was a small fortress near the city of Ligwan, managed by an individual from the Ayyubid dynasty. When Hulagu Khan's army advanced towards this fortress, a confrontation occurred, and evidently, the defender was defeated. He was captured alive by the Mongols, and then he was compelled to cut and consume parts of his own body. In this inhumane act, the governor lost his life. Mongols proceeded to slaughter all Muslims in that region. Subsequently, Hulagu Khan swiftly moved towards the Syrian city of Aleppo. This city was also the capital of Nasr al-Din Yusuf. In January 1260, Hulagu Khan, along with his army, reached Aleppo. Before the arrival of Nasr al-Din, the city had been abandoned. In his absence, the defenders of the city had taken a position in a fortress-like structure. However, it is apparent that they were defeated. Mongols captured him alive, and then he was forced to cut and consume parts of his own body. In this inhumane act, the governor lost his life. The Mongol army proceeded to slaughter all Muslims in the region. After Aleppo, Hulagu Khan's next target was Damascus. Nasr al-Din had already left the city before the arrival of Hulagu Khan. His absence meant that the defenders of the city had tried to block Hulagu Khan from entering for a week but failed. When the Mongol forces entered the city, the defenders took positions in a fortress-like building and continued fighting against the Mongols. However, by February 25, 1260, this structure also fell into Mongol hands. Following this, the victorious Mongol army indulged in a massacre of Muslims in Aleppo with utmost brutality. The Mongol forces, including the banditry troops, destroyed the Jamia Mosque of Aleppo without Hulagu Khan's orders. They killed the majority of Muslims in the city. After Aleppo, Hulagu Khan's next target was Damascus. Nasr al-Din had already left the city before the arrival of Hulagu Khan. His absence meant that the defenders of the city had tried to block Hulagu Khan from entering for a week but failed. When the Mongol forces entered the city, the defenders took positions in a fortress-like building and continued fighting against the Mongols. However, by February 25, 1260, this structure also fell into Mongol hands. Following this, the victorious Mongol army indulged in a massacre of Muslims in Aleppo with utmost brutality. The Mongol forces, including the banditry troops, destroyed the Jamia Mosque of Aleppo without Hulagu Khan's orders. They killed the majority of Muslims in the city. It seemed that he couldn't fight against the Mongols. Consequently, commanders who wanted to confront the Mongols left him and headed towards Egypt, where they joined the Mamluk Sultanate, abandoning him. Among these commanders was Babar, who was eager to take on the Mongols. They arrived in Egypt and joined the army of the Mamluk Sultan Saif al-Din Quds. Nasr al-Din Yusuf was now left alone. He too set out for Egypt to save his life, but the Mamluk rulers prevented him from entering Egypt. As Nasr al-Din Yusuf belonged to the Ayyubid dynasty, which had previously ruled Egypt, the Mamluks were concerned that his presence might lead to complications for their rule. In reality, governments during this period were formed and dissolved based on the whims of power. Therefore, decisions were made on the foundation of fear or a sense of preservation, and this was the case worldwide, with no one being openly trusted regardless of the circumstances. So, my friends, with Nasr al-Din absent and commanders gone, the Mongols easily captured Damascus. The governor of Damascus surrendered, while governors of several other Syrian cities in Homs and Hama submitted to the Mongols without a fight. Now, Nasr al-Din Yusuf's rule had come to an end, and he was being hunted in various regions of Syria. Soon, he returned to Mongol captivity and was sent to Hulagu Khan, where he remained imprisoned until his death. The Mongol rule was established over most parts of Syria. The Mongol army advanced through the Egyptian desert until reaching Sinai. However, to everyone's surprise, they did not enter Jerusalem. Gaza became the furthest point of their advance. Hulagu Khan's conquest was remarkable, and it seemed that the Mongols would soon invade Egypt as well. Still, Gaza proved to be the limit of their progress, as a sudden piece of news changed the course of history. Hulagu Khan received a message that the great Khan of the Mongols, Mongol Khan, had died while conquering the Southern Song dynasty in southern China. For the succession, Hulagu Khan's brothers Kublai Khan and Erik Bok had initiated a war. Mongol Khan's sudden death and the battle for succession troubled Hulagu Khan. He abandoned his plans for an invasion of Egypt. Hulagu Khan left his commander Kublai in charge of around 20,000 soldiers in Syria and headed to Azerbaijan with the remaining forces. He was supporting Erik Bok during the conflict with Kublai Khan. The familial ties between Hulagu Khan and Kublai Khan made the situation precarious for both of them. Berk Khan, a relative of Hulagu Khan, and a descendant of Joki Khan, who was part of the Mongol Golden Horde where Berk Khan ruled, sympathized with Erik Bok. During the struggle between Kublai Khan and Erik Bok, Berk Khan aligned with Erik Bok against Kublai Khan. However, instead of joining the fight in support of Erik Bok, he remained in Azerbaijan, keeping an eye on his Mongol relative, Hulagu Khan. This relative, Berk Khan, could become a threat to both Hulagu Khan and Kublai Khan at any moment. These were challenging times for Hulagu Khan, Kublai Khan, and their supporters, as they were entangled in a complex web of familial and political rivalries. For this reason, Hulagu Khan remained absent from Syria, and this absence proved to be costly for the Mongols. Hulagu Khan had temporarily withdrawn from the vicinity of Egypt. However, his desire to conquer Egypt remained unfulfilled. Consequently, he dispatched his ambassadors to the Mamluk court and commanded them to accept his suzerainty. The Mamluk Sultan Saif al-Din Qutuz was mature but far from being cowardly. Instead of succumbing to Mongol enslavement, he deemed it better to fight and die in battle. Qutuz ordered the execution of the Mongol envoys himself. Saif al-Din knew that after the killing of the envoys, an open confrontation with the Mongols was inevitable. However, since Hulagu Khan could not leave Azerbaijan at that time, Saif al-Din seized this opportunity and initiated the war. In July 1260, Saif al-Din's army, numbering between 15,000 to 20,000, entered Syria from the Sinai Desert. He first launched an attack on the Mongol military base, destroying it. The news of this small yet successful operation reached Damascus. The city's residents gathered to confront the Mongols, but Hulagu Khan's deputy Kibuka, an excellent commander, swiftly suppressed the uprising. Afterward, he advanced to face Saif al-Din in battle. Hulagu Khan's army included a significant number of Christians, but at this critical moment, the Crusader states on the coast of Syria sided not with the Mongols, but with the Mamluk Sultan Saif al-Din. They facilitated a safe passage for Saif al-Din to reach Ain Jalut and ensured the supply lines for food and drink. The confrontation between the Mamluks and Mongol armies took place precisely at Ain Jalut, a historic site that is now part of Israel. In this battle, the Mamluks, with a force of 15,000 to 20,000, were roughly equal in numbers to the Mongols, estimated to be 10,000 to 20,000. The difference was not significant. Although some claim that the Mongols had a numerical advantage, most of their forces lacked the discipline and training seen in the Mongol armies. Nonetheless, the Mamluks had gained a slight superiority. Among their commanders was the valiant Baibars, who was well acquainted with the region around Ain Jalut. Therefore, Saif al-Din, relying on Baibar's counsel, witnessed an unprecedented turn of events where Mongol tactics were reversed against them. On September 3, 1260, the battle commenced between the two forces. Baibars employed Mongol strategies against them, hiding a significant part of his army in nearby mountains. Then, with a small force of cavalry, Baibars confronted the Mongols directly. The cavalry engaged the Mongols in running battles for several hours, distracting them. When the Mongol forces grew weary, Baibars performed a masterful retreat from the battlefield. The Mongols immediately pursued the retreating force, and as they approached the mountains, the concealed Mamluk army ambushed them. In the ensuing chaos, Baibars executed a brilliant maneuver, leading to the Mongol forces being encircled. However, just when victory seemed imminent, Sultan Saif al-Din threw off his helmet, shouting to his soldiers, "For the sake of Islam, advance!" Upon hearing this, the spirits of the Mamluk soldiers soared, and they once again rallied to fight. In addition to arrows and swords, the Mamluks effectively utilized a small yet impactful weapon known as toop, causing some disruption. While it didn't cause significant casualties, it instilled fear in the Mongol horses, making them restive. The decisive battle continued as an essential Mongol commander fell into the hands of the Muslims. It is said that he was captured on the battlefield, and at that moment, he exclaimed, "Hulagu Khan will surely avenge my defeat." In response, the Mamluks swiftly executed him. Regardless of the cause of death, when the commander's lifeless body hit the ground, it shattered the backbone of the Mongol army. They fled the battlefield, and the Muslims consistently thwarted the Mongols with their established tactics. It was a pivotal moment in history. Afterwards, the Mongols couldn't hold their ground in Syria and retreated once again. When Hulagu Khan learned about the exact defeat and the commander's demise, he erupted in anger. However, he couldn't abandon Azerbaijan as the battles between Kublai Khan and Erik Bok were still ongoing. Consequently, he dispatched a force of around 6,000 Mongols to regain control over Aleppo. This Mongol force reoccupied Aleppo, brutally massacring the remaining Muslims. However, when this force reached the vicinity of Hama on December 10, 1260, a Muslim army of about 2,000 once again inflicted a decisive defeat upon the Mongols. In this second defeat, Hulagu Khan and the Mongols faced a setback that marked their permanent retreat. Hulagu Khan refrained from launching any major campaigns after this. The control over Syria slipped away from the Mongols, with the eastern bank of the Euphrates River becoming the border between the Mongol Ilkhanate and the Mamluk Sultanate. Hulagu Khan, burdened by his recent defeat in Syria, found himself in a predicament as he needed to face Berk Khan across the border. Berk Khan, having converted to Islam, accused Hulagu Khan of ruining Muslim cities and assassinating the Caliph without the counsel of his Muslim relatives. He pledged to seek divine justice for the blood of the innocent. Now, while Kublai Khan and Erik Bok battled in Mongolia, Hulagu Khan and Berk Khan engaged in skirmishes along the border. Hulagu Khan, troubled by the defeats in Syria, sought to boost his army's morale. In 1262, he openly challenged Berk Khan to a large-scale battle. Both sides gathered substantial forces, and in the ensuing clashes along the Golden Horde's borders, minor skirmishes continued. Hulagu Khan, already troubled by setbacks in Syria, initiated a significant confrontation against Berk Khan. During the first battle near Azerbaijan, Hulagu Khan suffered a humbling defeat, but he swiftly regrouped his forces and, in subsequent battles, compelled Berk Khan to retreat. Hulagu Khan started to believe that he was winning this war. He sent his son Abaka Khan in pursuit of Berk Khan. Abaka Khan, leading his forces, crossed the Tigris River, which flows from Georgia and drains into the Caspian Sea through Russian territories. When Abaka Khan was crossing this river, the water had frozen due to a snowstorm. Consequently, the Mongol army had to cross on foot, abandoning their camp. After successfully crossing a river, instead of pursuing the enemy, Abaka Khan decided to set up camp right there. The Mongols engaged in festivities for 3 days, during which time Berk Khan's spies closely monitored their activities. Unexpectedly, on the 4th day, Berk Khan launched a full-scale attack on Abaka Khan's camp. This occurred on January 13, 1263. Berk Khan's assault was so sudden that Abaka Khan's army abandoned their camp and attempted to cross the frozen surface of the Euphrates River hastily. However, the icy upper layer, which hadn't broken when initially crossing a river, now shattered. Thousands of fleeing soldiers couldn't bear the weight of their footsteps on the broken ice, leading to a chaotic scene. Countless soldiers plunged into the icy waters, and their bodies became permanently cold. This was a significant setback for Hulagu Khan. He decided to call off the war against Berk Khan and retreated from Azerbaijan. While Hulagu Khan had faced defeats in Syria and the Golden Horde, he soon received some good news. In 1264, a decision was made regarding the new Khan of the Mongol Empire. Erik Bok had emerged victorious in the struggle against his elder brother Kublai Khan, making him the undisputed Khan of the Mongol Empire. In 1264, Hulagu Khan also convened a grand assembly of the Mongols and proclaimed himself the Ilkhan, establishing the Ilkhanate. The term Ilkhan means subordinate or obedient Khan, conveying a message to Kublai Khan that he would remain a loyal subordinate. Hulagu Khan's Ilkhanate spanned from the Amu Darya in Central Asia to Turkey. It included a significant portion of Afghanistan and the Pakistani province of Balochistan. However, Hulagu Khan, after ascending to power, faced difficulties and could only survive for about a year. It is said that he became increasingly tyrannical towards the end of his life. Details about his death are scarce, but it is known that he fell severely ill in early 1265. On February 8 of the same year, at the age of only 47, Hulagu Khan passed away. He was buried on an island within the fortress where he had amassed treasures looted from Baghdad. His tomb, along with the treasure and the 40 captive princesses, has no trace today. The exact location of his grave remains undiscovered. The Alkani Sultanate, established after the demise of Hulagu Khan, managed to endure for a mere 70 years following his death. In the year 1335, the Sultanate came to an end, giving rise to several smaller principalities in its stead. Friends, observe, listen, and learn. In the Rise and Fall of Great Empires series, we delve into the stories of the grand empires throughout history and the tales of renowned heroes. However, have you ever pondered why we tend to remember warrior heroes more vividly? Why do their stories become more popular? And why do people often forget those who sacrifice their lives in efforts to prevent wars? Friends, your opinion is highly esteemed. Kindly share your thoughts in the comments.